Since 1982, Oasis has been putting people together with people, reaching out to teach, to touch, to enrich the lives of all who participate. Membership is free, as are many programs, though a few require a minimal fee. 170,000 adults over age 55 in 22 American cities now enjoy the benefits of this nonprofit organization.
Hi, I'm Natalie Dell, here with you on behalf of Oasis Reaching Out, the community access TV show for and by mature adults. Oasis is sponsored nationally by the May Department Store Company and sponsored locally by Kaufman's, Summa Health System, and Senior Workers Action Program. Oasis offers a wide variety of classes, activities, and special programs. If you're 55 or over, why not join us? We'll be right back after these messages to meet our guests.
What if you were in trouble? Where would you turn? In communities around the country, there is help available. Volunteers of America has been helping people build better lives for over 100 years. One of the nation's largest nonprofit charitable organizations, Volunteers of America builds stronger communities, restoring confidence and self-reliance to help people help themselves, reaching out to abused and neglected children and families, caring for the special needs of the elderly and disabled, providing services to people who are homeless and in poverty. Across the nation, Volunteers of America helped over 1.5 million people last year. There are no limits to what can be done. Find out how you can help change lives in your community. Call 1-800-899-0089. Volunteers of America. There are no limits to caring.
Welcome back. Well, we're here today with our two guests, and our first guest seated next to me is Kristen Latimer. And what is your title, Kristen?
I'm a registered nurse, a certified procurement transplant coordinator, and a senior organ procurement coordinator for LifeBank.
That's a lot of hats.
It is.
Okay, and we also have Mary Solderson. And Mary, how come you're here?
I'm here because I'm a volunteer certified public educator for LifeBank. I also am a donor mom.
Okay. All right, what is LifeBank? I never even heard of it until 6 months ago.
LifeBank is the federally appointed organ procurement organization for Northeast Ohio. We're a nonprofit organization, mostly funded by Medicare because of being nonprofit, and we facilitate all the donation and transplantation of organs and tissues for our area, which is 20 counties in the northeast tip of Ohio.
And how did you get connected with it?
Well, initially I was a bedside staff nurse in an intensive care unit. Did that for many years, and I also did a period of 5 years where I did acute hemodialysis and saw patients on hemodialysis when their kidneys had failed. And was there with them when their pagers would go off and they'd get the call that a kidney was ready for them. And as soon as their treatment was done, they needed to go to their transplant center. And they would come back and visit us after the transplants had occurred. And it was really interesting and really neat to see the change in their life, the change in their families, their overall outlook on life after they had received that transplant. And I always thought that would be kind of cool to be on the other end and be able to help facilitate getting that organ for them. So that's really what got me interested, first of all, in transplant and in donation. After I did hemodialysis, I went back to intensive care nursing, worked in a trauma ICU, and was the staff nurse on many organ donors, and just saw how the process worked and wanted to be involved in that. And so I pursued that line of work, and that's where I'm at now.
Is it emotionally draining?
It can be. Whenever you're dealing with a potential organ donor or an organ family, or even a tissue donor, death has occurred, and you're talking to them at a very unique point in their life. one that they don't want to be in. And what we're able to do then is to be able to offer them that option of organ and tissue donation. And it doesn't take away from the death that has occurred, doesn't take away from their loss, but it can add a measure of comfort to them, knowing that maybe they can be able to help facilitate someone else's life through this. And so, yeah, it can be emotionally draining because you're really giving of yourself quite a bit in talking to that family and letting them know what their options are and helping them work through whatever issues that they may have so that they can make the decision that's right for them.
Mary, you have unfortunately been in that unique position.
That's correct. About 14 years ago, my daughter was a victim of an attempted kidnapping. She was subsequently thrown out of a car and landed on her head, had brain surgery, and within 36 hours was declared brain dead. At that point in time, we were well aware, after family discussion, of what she wanted, and we knew she had had the driver's license sticker, but we also had further conversation with the transplant coordinator and were able to determine what she wanted to donate. So we were able to follow her wishes, and that made an absolutely horrible experience into one that was at least bearable, and now, to me, these years later, very comforting to know. I am aware that the 3 people who received Susan's organs nearly 14 years ago, through my contacts with LifeBank, I've found out that they are still alive and well and with their families.
But you haven't had any face-to-face contact?
No. But because of the knowledge as to how I felt as the donor mother and the comfort our family received from knowing that something good came out of a horrible situation. When I was part of a corporate reorganization in 1995, I decided to begin to volunteer extensively. I took an early retirement and started volunteering for LifeBank. I am now a certified public educator for them. I have gone out to many schools in northeastern Ohio. Mainly, my main thrust is high school students. I've talked to thousands of students and explained the donation process to them. They have very many misconceptions about it, as does the whole population. And I think from giving a donor family side, it makes it more understandable to them. I can also explain some of the myths and misconceptions that there are as far as donation. This has been very fulfilling to me. I'm not able to give Susan a birthday present, Christmas present, or anything like that now. I can do something for her to honor her presence, and this is my way of doing it.
A very noble way.
Thank you.
I was absolutely amazed in reading this material because I started out ignorant, okay? I really, you know, unless it happens to you, regardless of what it is, you just don't know. And I was amazed at the different, I just thought of transplants as a kidney or a heart or a lung. Could you go into the extent of the, what is used?
There's really 3 different groupings of transplant. And not everybody can be all of those groupings. And so we take each individual case by case, and we figure out what they're eligible for. You can become an organ donor, and organs in this area are hearts and lungs, liver, kidneys, pancreas, and small bowel or intestine that can be transplanted. And that's what we can recover here and transplant here locally. We've also transplanted a larynx, so we've been able to establish voice for somebody that was unable to speak for 20 years.
Is that something brand new?
I think, you know, in transplant, it's a very new part of medicine, where medicine's been around for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. Transplant really did not start until the 1950s and 60s. So in retrospect, it's very new. And they're always looking at better ways to save life, improve life, and enhance life. And they're finding all different kinds of mechanisms to do that by. And one was doing a larynx transplant. So that is something very new and very much on the cutting edge of science, and it's neat to be able to participate in that and help do that. You can also be a tissue donor, and tissues are things such as bone to prevent amputation, so that someone can get a solid bone graft and not lose their arm or leg. They can also use skin for burn victims, which is more like a human bandage, and those skin grafts then allow that person to heal, to not need as many replacement surgeries, and have far less scarring in the outcome. They use saphenous veins and femoral veins, which are the long veins in your legs. And the most common thing for that is coronary bypass grafting. So when somebody has an open heart surgery and needs that bypass graft, then they can use donor vein for that.
Oh, see, all of my friends that have had bypass, the most painful part of the bypass has been all of them have had the veins taken from their own leg.
Right, right. And oftentimes, if you've had that vascular problem to begin with, and you've needed that bypass graft, somewhere down the line, you're probably going to need it redone. And if you've already utilized one of your own legs' veins, then you can't use the other one, or you have no blood supply to the lower extremities, and they'll use a donor vein for that.
That's the only time they use donor veins?
Oh no, anything that needs revascularized. If you've got a vascular problem to begin with that's clogging up your arteries and veins and causing you to need bypass surgery, then maybe yours aren't clean enough to use to revascularize your heart. And in that case, then they can use a donor vein. They're also using the femoral veins and taking the valves out of the veins, because your veins actually have valves that open and close and allow the blood flow back and forth to your heart. And when you have a problem with your veins, it's usually the valves that are the problem, and so they're actually transplanting those little tiny femoral vein valves into the native vein and reestablishing blood flow that way. And you can also then donate eyes, which again is establishing sight for somebody who's lost that gift of sight.
Amazing. Okay, well, let's get back to Mary. And I'm sure you know the answer to this is, what about your age? You know, is there an age limit to a donor?
We like to tell people it's newborn to 90. It used to be several years back, but that there was an age cutoff. There is not anymore. We are all living longer and living more healthy lives, so that in just last year or two, Kristen, they had begun to transplant, for instance, kidneys or other vital organs from an older donor. And they probably would use that for an older recipient, because that person's lifespan might not be as long as, say, a young child or a small, younger person. But so it is newborn to 90. At the moment that someone is declared brain dead, that is the time that they would determine whether that person is suitable for donation. After an extensive testing period, after life history and lifestyle history that they can sometimes receive from the family, if that's a possibility, that would be the time that Life Bank would be involved. Once brain death occurs, that would be the time then that the family would be contacted.
Could you explain to our viewers just exactly what brain dead is?
Brain death is not a coma. In a coma, though someone might appear to be dead, there is still blood and oxygen circulation to the brain. It is not a chronic vegetative state. It is legal death. It is the cessation of all blood and oxygen flowing to and from the brain and the brain stem, and there never will be any flow again. The state has mandated procedures to determine brain death. Every hospital has a particular policy as to how that, how that is processed. I know in the case of Susan's death, there were so many doctors and technicians and tests involved. Everything that was available for her in 1986 was done. I know because I've since talked with people at the hospital, and I've met the Life Bank staff, and I know the procedures that are gone through to assure that it is brain death and it is legal death, the same as cardiac death is.
Okay.
It is, however, very difficult for a family to understand brain death. I know for our family and for many families, because many donors are a victim of a very sudden and traumatic incident, whether it be an accident, something violent that happened, perhaps a suicide attempt, maybe a sudden aneurysm. All those things are something that would immediately send a family into a trauma. And as things progress and testings are done, if you don't understand the machines and the testing, it's very confusing. It took us some time with a lot of explanation from intensive care nurses to understand what was going on. It's difficult when you see a loved one lying in a bed and they look as if they're breathing because the machines are doing that function for them. In Susan's case, her color was good. She looked very good. The only thing that looked weird was the white turban of bandages on her head from when her hair had been shaved and from the brain surgery. So it was very difficult for us to accept that diagnosis. Sure. It's repeated many times by many doctors, and the Life Bank coordinator that we had at that point in time was so compassionate and so understanding as to our need to know and understand everything. And I know that's what they do now.
What would happen if the organs are not suitable for transplant? Is that just a loss, a waste?
There's many things that can be done in that case. Our intent in recovering organs is always to remove them with the intent for transplant, so that you can transplant that solid organ and save someone's life by doing that. When the organs aren't suitable for transplant, their function is poor, they've been damaged maybe in an accident that caused the brain death to begin with, maybe just that patient's past medical history. Like if you are a diabetic, then your pancreas is not suitable for transplant because other people that need pancreas transplants are diabetic as well, and that's why they need the transplant to begin with. So you look at each individual organ and its function separate, and you evaluate each individual system that way. When it's not suitable for transplant, most of the time we do not recover it, because there's no reason for us to recover what we cannot utilize.
Oh, you can tell before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We can tell before by doing different blood tests and non-invasive testing. Sometimes ultrasounds or x-rays can help us with that kind of determination. And ultimately, once we would go to surgery, we would then visualize that organ and look at it and see how it looks. Mm-hmm. And a good functioning non-diseased organ has a certain appearance, and a diseased organ would have a different appearance. And you can ultimately then tell by looking at it.
And if you couldn't use the internal organs, you can still use the skin, the tissues?
You can still use the different tissues. If the heart, say, is determined that maybe the patient has suffered a heart attack, and that heart is damaged, and we can't use the heart itself for transplant, the heart valves can be recovered and transplanted. The pericardium, which is the sac around the heart, can be recovered and utilized, often for patients with brain surgery. So it's many different things can be recovered and transplanted, even if the organ itself is not suitable.
Well, one thing I have heard is, from my friends, are the fears. I don't know if I want to be an organ donor.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go into, both of you maybe, some of the fears that potential donors have?
Sure.
I think the biggest fear for donor families is probably that they will not do everything they can to save my loved one's life. I hear in the high schools all the time the students say, if I'm in an accident, the paramedics will look at my wallet. If I'm a donor, they won't save my life. When you explain to them that in order for organs to be used, there has to be that constant supply of blood and oxygen, then they can reason out, it wouldn't make any sense to let me die because those organs couldn't be used anyhow. And also the fact that obviously the paramedics and emergency room doctors are duty-bound to save lives. They truly don't have time to sift who might be potential donors. There are other misconceptions as far as a fear of the medical establishment, that someone, a lot of people think, oh, a doctor would, young people in particular, a doctor would just let me die, pull the plug on me more or less, and then buy or sell my organs to somebody else. There's a federal law against buying and selling organs in the United States, so that obviously cannot be done. The medical profession has, or the organ transplant profession has to deal with a lot of misconceptions that there are because of movies, TV shows, things like that, where donation and the whole process is not portrayed in the proper light, maybe in an entertaining light.
Could you go into specifics about that?
I have seen people with, on the screen, with the little red cooler containing a heart flying by helicopter from California to New York for a transplant. A heart is viable for only 4 hours from when it's removed from me and transplanted into you. So obviously that's a fallacy. That might possibly have been a kidney if someone saw something like that. They are viable for up to 72 hours. And you know, they can be preserved in a solution for use. So just things like that. Other things I've seen portrayed are, on one particular TV show, a patient was a donor. The operation was performed to remove organs. The patient was left entirely alone, and everybody else went out on their merry business. That is not the truth. I recently, in the past 3 years, had the privilege of meeting the lady who was the coordinator we talked with almost 14 years ago. She has a new job as assisting in delivery, and one of my daughters was having a baby. I did talk with her, and I said, you know, I know the coordinators stay with that patient throughout the operation. They even remain with the patient until the funeral home or someone comes, you know, to do the further proceedings for funeral. And she said, Mary, I did that for Susan. And that made me feel very good.
To think she would remember after 14 years.
Right, to think that she'd remember, but to know that it was done. That's a real comfort for the family, because you always want, in particular your child, you want someone to be with them.
Would it delay the funeral, or would it interfere with the showing of the body?
No. In Susan's case, there was also a coroner's autopsy. The funeral was not delayed. We were able to have an open casket funeral, and I can assure you that no one knew by looking that she was an organ donor. The thing that might have looked a little different was the blonde wig we purchased, and it wasn't her hairstyle. We also, as a donor family, incurred no expense for the operation to transplant organs. She did have hospital expenses, thankfully, and those expenses were up to the point that she was declared brain dead. Thankfully, she had insurance that those were covered. There is no cost to a donor family.
What about religious beliefs? Does this contradict any religion?
Do you want to? No.
It really does not. I think all major denominations throughout the world have put forth statements saying that they agree with donation, that to help our fellow man would be something that God or a higher power would want us to do. There's really only one group that we know of that says they don't want to be donors, and those are gypsies. And I believe they think they walk, or they have a period of time on earth before they're reincarnated, and they feel they need all of their stuff to go with them to do that. And so they don't typically donate. But all other religions generally believe in that and really leave it up to the individual. And it really is a very individualistic decision to make.
What about, I believe you have bereavement services? Could you go into that?
We certainly want to facilitate and help our donor families in any way possible. So we offer full bereavement services, grief counseling, and we follow up with all of our donor families for up to 2 years and longer if they want. We offer them support systems and different groups that they can meet with. We also have a memorial service every year that we hold for our donor families to help
Where do you have that?
them remember.
Where do you do this?
The memorial service is held usually in the Cleveland area at an off-site location, usually on a Sunday afternoon, and we get together with the donor families. They have a memory board where they can bring pictures of their loved one. Their name is called and they are recognized for the generosity and the gift that they've been able to give to others. We as transplant coordinators all go. All the Life Bank staff goes, and we have a representative from the donor families or from the recipient end also that speaks for all of the recipients that are involved in all of those, and just helping to remember that loved one.
That's wonderful. Do you do specific counseling if somebody would need it, like on a one-to-one basis? Do you have?
We do that as well, and then we also have a large network referral system where the people can be referred out if they need more specific type of help.
Okay, what would you say to our audience? There are people out there who might want to donate. What do they do now so it will happen?
They need to talk it over with their family members and let their family members know what their decisions are and what their wishes would be at the time of their death. We don't get involved in the family, we don't get involved in the case until that death has been declared and fully explained to the family. And then we go in and we talk with the family, because they can't understand donation or agree to donate if they don't understand the death.
Could you give us a phone number if somebody would like to call?
Certainly. We have a toll-free number, and it's 1-888-558-5433, and that's a 24-hour number that they can get information, and we can also send packets of information out to them.
Okay. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming out to the studio, and I have learned a lot, and I'm sure my audience has learned a lot.
Good.
So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Remember, Oasis programs are open to all adults 55 and over. Interested in cultural activities? Join the Oasis band. Take art classes. Learn to line dance or speak French or Spanish. Need to relax? Take yoga or Tai Chi. Want hands-on activities? Be a tutor or work with us on this TV program. There are many other Oasis programs, truly something for everyone. Oasis centers are located at Kaufman's at Chapel Hill on the east side of Akron, and at the Village at St. Edward on the west side. Come join us. This is Natalie Dell for Oasis Reaching Out.